Thank you for tuning in to Grieving Voices. If this is your first time listening, welcome. And if you've listened before, welcome back. Today, my guest is Debbie Weiss. She is a seasoned life strategist with over 5 decades of experience and has faced some of life's most daunting challenges head on and emerged as a beacon of hope and inspiration for others. As the author of the highly anticipated memoir, On Second Thought, Maybe I Can, and a contributing author in the collaborative book Heart Whispers, Debbie's words have the power to uplift and motivate. You can also be uplifted and motivated by Debbie through her podcast, Maybe I Can, and pass along some heart joy to others through her shop of Sprinkle of Hearts. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So I read about you a little bit. I scoped, the webs and was reading a little bit about your story. And I really want to, I don't think this has been talked about ever specifically on the podcast in almost 4 years. So I'm excited for that. But you talk a lot about, like, on your website and in your form and stuff that you filled out, um, like age 50 was this pinnacle year for you. And it was almost as if, like, and for me personally, I had what I call a midlife unraveling. Mine was in my earlier 30s, but which it can happen for any time during our lifetime, right? But for you, it was around 50. And would you say that that was a midlife unraveling or midlife crisis or midlife awareness, or how would you describe that?
I think I would describe it as midlife awareness. At that point, I had been a family caregiver to my father for over 30 years. My oldest son, who was diagnosed on the autistic spectrum. And at that point, I wasn't a caregiver to my husband, but just for the 30 years with my dad and then adding my son took it to a whole new level. And I was stressed. I still had regular responsibilities like we all have. I was working full time and I was actually self-employed. So I had to worry about my customers and my employees and whatnot. And of course, things at home. And, my kids at that age were being, at least my younger one, shuffled off to whatever event, but life, right? And it just never seemed to stop. It was just this get up, do it again. What fires do I have to put out today? What do I need to make sure to check off my list? And when I turned 50, my friends insisted that we go away for the weekend on a girls' trip for my birthday. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'd love to do that, but how am I going to leave my husband, with all of these in charge of these things and whatever. And I went. And on that trip, it was the first time in my adult life that I did not have to worry about anybody else but myself. And when they asked me, well, what do you want to do? Or where do you want to go eat? I'm like looking over my shoulder, like, are they asking me? And through just reconnecting with my friends and really myself, I kind of came to the realization of, who am I? Who have I become? Not that I would ever change taking care of any of my family members, but I had done that at the complete exclusion of taking care of myself. And I think at 50, it was also kind of that mortality motivation thing. Like, okay, is my life more than half over? Am I really making it to 100? I hope so. But chances are I'm on the downhill slide, let's say. And I don't want to be that person who gets to the end, looks back and said, what happened? I just wasted. I don't want to say wasted, but I didn't do what I wanted to do. And I didn't have anything I wanted to do, by the way, but it just felt like if I didn't do something and take control in some way at that point, the next 50 years were going to be gone and I was going to be that person looking back. And so that was the aha moment.
Can we rewind the clock a little bit? I read on your website that it was after, like, the day after you graduated high school, your dad had this massive stroke.
Yep.
Why did the responsibility, because people listening, if I'm curious, they're probably curious too. Why did the responsibility fall on you?
So my parents, several years before, had been separated off and on. And they got back together. And it's funny, I don't know why. My mother is still alive, very happy to say. And I don't know why I really haven't discussed this with her. But I don't know how their marriage was at that point. My father was days shy of turning 46 when he had the stroke. My mother was 39 years old. And they were separated because my father had an affair. And I think, for my mom, of course, when I was that age, I didn't understand. Then as an adult, it has a different perspective. My mom did what she needed to do for my father. Don't get me wrong. But I always had this daddy's little girl connection. I have one younger brother. So I always grew up feeling like it was kind of two teams, my mother and my brother and my father and I. And he was my hero. He fell from the pedestal with the affair for sure. But still, when I saw my mother was doing what she needed to do as far as getting him the doctors and the care and all of that stuff, but she didn't really have like what I felt she should be compassionate. She didn't have as much sympathy and again, this was according to what my standards were. I did actually go away to college. So my father was in the hospital the whole entire summer. Very different. This was 1981. Very different than, how it would work now. And I left for college, which that and alone is traumatic, right? But to know that you're leaving behind, my dad, I didn't know what was going to happen. I knew, again, he would be safe and taken care of, but not how I felt comfortable. And I went away to school not being invested. And that it's another whole story, but I wound up leaving school, coming home, attending a local university for a year and a half and taking care of my father at home. So at the time he was, had a physical therapist and a speech therapist, and I had to do the exercises with him. And I would actually help him get into a bathing suit so that I could put him onto, the chair over the bathtub with the handheld shower and give him a shower. I was doing that. He was still living at home. After a year and a half, now I was 2 years into college, and I thought to myself, kind of like at 50, I lost this college experience that my friends are having, and I'm going to regret it. And I actually did transfer away to yet a third school for the last 2 years. That's where I graduated from. In my senior year, my mother had already made the decision that she wanted a divorce. And so she found him a place to live, which back then, like assisted living, independent living, not like it is today. So we lived in Long Island. She could only find a place in New Jersey. It was about an hour and a half from where we lived. And there he was, at the time, still not even 50, living with 85-year-olds. And so once they were divorced, then he was my real responsibility as far as, he didn't live with me. He did live independently. He was able to do that. But, I was the money person because he didn't have a lot of money, and that changed over the years. And I'd had to move him to different places. And then he had other medical problems. And now I'm learning all about, doctors and specialists. And I didn't even know what all those ologists were at 22 years old. Right. So that's kind of how it happened. I did hold a lot of anger and resentment towards my mother. I did for a long time, but I have come to terms with it because I know that she certainly in her own mind didn't think, oh, I'm going to saddle my daughter with this. Mm-hmm. I think she was thinking, and I'm putting words in her mouth, she did take care of him officially, got him what he needed. If I had a question, it wasn't like she wasn't going to help me, but she wasn't the person getting the phone calls and having to visit and bring food and, whatever. Over the years, I could literally write another book about my 30-year experience with my dad, some funny. So that's how it happened.
So did you find yourself into a career that like what did you go to school for, and did you follow the path that you intended?
So I really didn't, I never knew what my path was. I was always a numbers girl, a math girl, but not science. So I knew I didn't want anything like that. And I originally wanted to go to law school to become an attorney, a sports attorney, to deal with like athletes' contracts and stuff. Well, simultaneously, I was also with my high school boyfriend who I was engaged to by or right after I graduated from college. And I decided not to go to law school at the time. And I had graduated with a degree in accounting. So I became a CPA.
Okay.
It was fine.
Did you end up marrying the man that you were engaged to?
Nope, because he, even though he'll still deny it, wound up meeting someone else while we were together and left me for her. But in the end, just like so many things like that are heartbreaking at the time, actually, I knew deep in my heart that he was not the right person for me. I just didn't have a lot of self-confidence or self-esteem. And I felt like I better take whoever's interested because I'll probably never meet anyone else. So he did me a favor.
And I think, that can only come in hindsight, right? And as we don't, in the moment, it's like you think it's just devastating and you think your world's falling apart. And then after you have some time pass and you have fall into a different path, right? Because of that changes the trajectory of your life. You look back and it's like, oh, phew, I dodged a bullet there.
Exactly.
Um,
Completely.
so for 30 years, you cared for your dad. So you had a lot of time to have conversations and work through a lot of things, maybe that, with your mom and all of this, the dynamics of the family and things. But when did he recently pass?
No, he passed away in 2011. Literally
Okay.
like 30 years. He had the stroke in 1981 and he died in 2011, a month before like the anniversary of the stroke.
Oh, wow. It's so young, so
So
young.
young. Yeah. It was crazy. I mean, we were, of course, I can think of the day it happened. And, you know, stroke wasn't even a term that you would equate to a 45 or 46-year-old. It just was so out of the blue and so left field and bizarre. But things
Co-
happen.
Coincidentally, just in the last month or so, so my son had a heart murmur found when he was he was 12, sports physical, and it's due to, when you take your first breath when you're born, the flap between the left and right ventricle doesn't seal, and so it can leak a little blood and you can develop blood clots, and stroke is a risk of that.
Yeah.
But just in the last month, two people I've heard, well, one person I know had a stroke because of that. And I just found out today, another person, they were 33 years old when they had a stroke due to the same thing.
Wow.
And so when children are found to have a heart murmur when they're young, it's really important to investigate why that is. And I'm glad that my son's doctor had the due diligence to do that. But I'm thinking, he's 18 now, but I'm thinking, man, he should probably start taking a baby aspirin.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. So my
Because look how
father,
that changes your
oh my goodness. Oh yes. My father's stroke was not from that.
Okay, because he was so young, that's why.
His carotid arteries were blocked. One
Mm,
completely blocked. So, in your neck here. So the oxygen got cut off to his brain.
wow. So how did that weekend? What did your life look like after that girls' weekend? Which I just want to say how important it is for people listening, how important girls' weekends are.
Oh my goodness.
I take a yearly camping trip with girls, my
Good for
girlfriends,
good for you.
and we have for years, and it's so important.
It's the best. It's the best. It's just so different than anything else, and just gives you the time and perspective away to laugh and just relax and enjoy yourself. So I couldn't agree with you more. It's always nice to have it on the calendar too. Whenever we come back from something, we just came back from my 60th birthday trip. And so whenever we come back, it's like, okay, now what? We're planning what the next thing is, to at least always have that, to look forward to.
Because if it's not on the calendar, it won't happen.
It doesn't happen. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Because everyone has responsibilities,
absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. Yep. You've got to commit to it, because it's easy to back out and say, I have too much to do, I can't go. But unless it's earth shattering, life altering, go. You'll be happy you did, for sure.
So what did that look like when you came back?
When I came back, I don't think that I consciously said, okay, now I'm going to start changing my life. But yet I did decide, I guess I should say, you can't come back and be like, okay, now I want to change everything, right? That's way too overwhelming. For me, I've had a weight problem my whole entire life, just like many people with weight problem, the normal stuff, go on this, especially as a young child, diets were different then, this extremely restrictive diet, lose a certain amount, after 3 months of basically being able to only eat lettuce, then it's like, oh my gosh, give me something else. Then you taste it. Then the next thing the 25 pounds or whatever is back and more, and so on and so forth. And at that point, I don't think I was the heaviest I ever was, but I was 100 pounds overweight. And of all the diets, I have done them all. Weight Watchers was one that was like, worked for me. And I said, I'm going to go back to Weight Watchers, but I'm going to be different this time, because when I went in the past, it'd be like, okay, I need to lose X amount of weight by a certain date, or else I'm a failure. And if I don't eat something on plan, oh, forget it. I might as well just ditch the whole idea. So instead, I said, what I'm going to do, I'm going to commit to going to the Weight Watchers meeting 1 time a week. That's it. Nothing to do with how much weight I lose, what I'm eating, if I'm recording my food, none of that. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to get going to the meeting down. And I did that, and I didn't lose any weight. I didn't gain any, but I didn't lose any. And then once I was comfortable with that and actually enjoying the meeting and meeting people and, looking forward to going, then I added another layer. So I'm just going to pay attention or track my food 50% of the time, and got comfortable with that. And, decided for the first time in my life, there is no end game here. There is no on and off. This was just when the term lifestyle was being thrown around, but that's what it was. That's what I told myself. You're never going to be on a diet again. This is a lifestyle. You're going to eat ice cream. You should eat ice cream. Nothing is forbidden. But just because you ate ice cream doesn't mean you're going to eat ice cream 7 days a week and you're going to add other things. It just doesn't work like this. It's a balance, and you're never going to be off it. And, for so long, I looked at other people who didn't have a weight problem, and I just assumed it was easy for them. I'd see them on a Saturday night eating and drinking whatever they wanted. Maybe I don't think I made the connection. Hey, they don't eat and drink like that 21 meals a week. I was so busy feeling sorry for myself, that I didn't take the time to really be honest with myself. And I think it probably took me, I tell you, I got to go back and look, 2 to 3 years to lose 90 of the 100 pounds. But I was, as we say, a turtle, slow and steady wins the race. And just the fact that I had stuck with something for that long, now it had become my new normal. And I actually have not yet hit that 100-pound mark. And since that time that I hit that number, which was probably 2016 or 17. So for me, 6 years, let's say, of basically maintaining, I've gone up 10 pounds, but then I've been able to lose it too, is a huge victory. So what changed? Weight Watchers didn't change. Yeah, every year they make some little tweaks to their program, but it wasn't that. It was my mindset. It was all in my approach and how I was thinking about the whole thing. And that was really the start of my understanding how my mind, my thoughts has the power to shape my life. I was giving the power to everybody and everything else and taking no responsibility. But yet it was the things I was thinking. I was feeling sorry for myself. Why me? Poor me. Oh, I might as well just eat a cookie. Whereas when I changed those thoughts, I changed my behavior.
Well,
And
and
that
when
was the start.
congratulations, first of all,
Thank you.
on maintaining and changing your relationship with food, because essentially
Yes,
that's really what you did. But
absolutely.
I think too, like with all this, like if you're constantly at that fight or flight stress level in your life where you're just that hamster on the wheel, it's far easier to just abandon what you know is healthy for you and just choose what's easiest.
Especially as an emotional stress eater, I
Mhm.
would look forward to the end of the day when I could finally sit down, not have anybody ask me for anything, watch an hour or two of TV and eat some snacks. And my husband also had a weight problem. He didn't care about it like I did. He couldn't care less. So, a lot of the times I had like a partner in crime,
Mm.
which, uh, in hindsight, I actually prefer that over the partner who looks at you and watches everything that you're putting in your mouth. At first, I thought, oh my gosh, it's even harder having him. And then when I listen to my friends and what I hear and people watching you, like I never had to worry about that. And for the most part, and felt, yes, I would be upset about how I looked as I would get heavier, but I never felt that his love was tied to my weight, which was how it should be, but it's not always the case.
As you were changing and coming into these different new awarenesses, did some of that rub off on your husband?
I think so. I don't think, certainly he didn't incorporate my food choices and changes into his life, but he was actually, I don't cook. Um, he did. He loved it. He loved grocery shopping. That was all him. And without him, I really couldn't have done it because I would bring him recipes and he would make things for me and portion them out. And, he was my partner in it. And when he stopped cooking, it was very hard for me.
Did he stop cooking? Did he get sick? Because I know your husband, that's what brought you to the podcast today.
Yeah. So my husband, funny, I would look back and say, boy, you went through male menopause after you turned 50. Everything seemed to I noticed when he turned 50, he was diabetic, he had Crohn's disease. Um, he had some social anxiety, which I didn't really understand. And then as my kids were both diagnosed with ADHD, it was clear he had ADHD. Um, but it just seemed like he started getting crankier, which he wasn't cranky before. It was looking back, it was now I understand more that there was a mental illness component coming into play, but I didn't understand that then. And so as time went on, it just got worse and worse and worse. And the things that he enjoyed, he was no longer enjoying. It seemed like now he had to see a cardiologist. Now he had to see, whatever it was, things started popping up. But yet, because of his mental illness, he didn't take care of them as he should. So I would be making doctor's appointments for him because I was basically ran his life. I would be making doctor's appointments for him and he wouldn't go. And then I'd have to either call or cancel and reschedule. And it was like a cycle. And then I had all of these different appointments. Now, simultaneously, he and I worked together. I have an insurance agency. He worked there with me from the beginning. He was an integral part. I mean, more so than me. He was basically, customers loved him. I was more the behind the scenes girl doing the numbers and keeping the business running. But he was the face that people came to see. And slowly we would drive separately and he would drive to work and he would text me or call me and say, I'm pulled over on the side of the road. I had to pull over because I was going to get sick. And I thought, this didn't happen just once. This happened more than once. And then he would pull up in front of the office and call and say, I can't come in. I have to go home. Be like, what? And this went on for years. And I thought that it all had to do with his Crohn's. But looking back, it wasn't. It was anxiety. And it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I would say that the last 10 to 12 years of his life, I didn't really have a husband in the sense that we all think. We did not have a physical relationship. We did not, I was just taking care of him and he started doing less and less. Eventually, one day, he just walked out of the office and said, I can never come back. And he left me he came back to my house, but he couldn't go back to the office. And I said, Garrett, can't I just bring home the stuff and we just go through it and you tell me who do I need to call? What do I need to do? Customer service is a huge thing for me. So just that gave me anxiety thinking that I was going to let the ball drop on so many things because of his procrastination and his illness. He had stacks of papers miles high in his desk you couldn't even see. And he never would do it. He could not do it. And so a long-term employee of mine, she and I went through and we just called people and said, look, he had to leave suddenly and we want to make sure, what's outstanding. And everybody was understanding. But for me, that was super difficult because each step of the way, I'd think, okay, now he's home. He doesn't have the stress of working. So now he should be able to get back to going to the grocery store and cooking and his mood should improve. And it didn't happen. It was just, I think, a very steep decline from that part on. Now he wasn't, let me just also say simultaneously, our oldest son at that point was suffering from depression and anxiety that was pretty intense. And he wound up being hospitalized and it was traumatic and horrible. And I think that trauma sealed the deal. And he then, again, I didn't realize at the time I couldn't get him out of bed for days. That was the depression. I would be at work. He would have a doctor's appointment. I'd be calling the house. The phone would be ringing. He'd be sleeping. Then I'd be worried. I'd jump in my car and drive home. It was so incredibly stressful. It eventually culminated in May of 2022 with me somehow, and this is a whole mental illness discussion. It's very difficult to get somebody hospitalized if they're not willing, but I was able to get him hospitalized. And in a week, he made an amazing transformation. And he came home from that hospitalization. He was so happy and upbeat, and he was ready to embrace. He had to go to online therapy 5 days a week for 3 hours at a time. He was like the star in the group. It was like, who is this man? And we had all of us, it was like, just a cloud lifted. And for the first time, I did really feel hopeful, like, okay, he's going to come through this. And less than 6 weeks later, he was diagnosed with terminal blood cancer. Just talking about it gets me upset. Sorry. It's just so crazy how life just throws these twists and turns your way, you know? And that was June of 2022. And he died December 30th of last year.
So sorry.
Thanks. And those 6 months were hell. And honestly, the physical part, yes, but the mental, it got really bad. So, you know, it's if somebody, because I never had any experience with mental illness, and it's just like anything else. Until you do, you just can't understand it. It is just, there's no logic to disease either, right? With cancer and whatnot, but we all know people. And there's protocols, right? And we know what the odds are, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And you kind of know what the ultimate, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But with mental illness, it is, it's like throwing darts at a dartboard. And then when you compound all of these other factors, these physical these physical illnesses with that, it's too complex. And he was hospitalized for the whole month of November last year in 2 different facilities. And because of the medications and whatever, he actually had a psychotic break and lost touch with reality. And it was awful. It was medication driven, I think, from what the first hospital did and how they took him off some meds too suddenly. And once they got him stable, he came back home. But now he hated me because I had put him through this. And that was literally the beginning of December. And then he was not on hospice. It was not one of those things where we knew it was imminent. Nope. It came out of the blue. And he in the end basically made the decision. I don't know if it was rational, but he on Christmas night, he was, I heard him like do a little cough. My son had a cold. I'm like, what is that? And he said, oh no, it's nothing. And he really wasn't coughing, but then he was tired, and, he's very sick. So, you don't really think too much of it. And then by 2 days later, I was like, I want to do your blood pressure. I want to take your temperature. No, leave me alone. And I got to do the temperature, at least because I could just swipe, and he had a temperature. It wasn't terrible, but with his situation, that was where I was supposed to call the doctor. Screaming at me, no. The next day, the temperature is 102. I said, that's it. And he would not. The next morning at 6 o'clock in the morning, he basically, he couldn't move. I was sleeping. So I have a bedroom upstairs. He couldn't go upstairs anymore. So the room that I'm sitting in now, it's a little office in my downstairs. I turned this into a bedroom. So he was downstairs. I was sleeping upstairs, but he had a funny feeling. He just didn't want to be alone. So I had been sleeping on an air mattress in my family room. And, so I could hear him to help him. And basically he wound up falling. I couldn't get him up. I tried to get my sons to help. We couldn't move him. And at this point, he's got this fever. I said, I don't care what you say. I'm calling. They came. They said, you have to go to the hospital, and told him all the reasons. And he just dug in and said, I am not going. So stop talking to me. And one of the EMTs said to me, we'll be back today, and he might not be conscious. And I didn't have a choice. what do you do? And did he know? Was he giving up? He was just so sick of hospitals at that point, especially after that traumatic experience. And about noon, his temperature was 103. And I said, okay, I'm done. And he was having trouble breathing and he got scared and he said, okay. And I called, and now, we've had a lot of trips to the hospital. And since he did have some OCD tendencies, I knew all the things that I, had to get for him to make him feel good. And I'm gathering that stuff, and he wants him to get dressed. And I'm like not yelling at him, but get dressed. You don't need to get dressed. You're going to the hospital. Okay. I help him get his pants on, and he's, his breathing is labored. And he says to me, what's taking them so long? And I looked at him and I said, are you kidding me right now? Because this is how we talk to each other. Like, after this morning, now you're annoyed that they're taking so long. And he said, are you really saying that to me right now? I said, okay, I guess you're right. And it was interesting because he said to me, are you coming? And I thought, am I coming? When have I never not come? Of course, I'm going to be right behind you. Turned out in the hospital, he went into in the ambulance, he went into respiratory failure. And they asked him if he wanted to be intubated, which he had said, before that he didn't, but in the moment he did, but he died less than 24 hours later. So that was our last conversation, which I don't have regrets about. I honestly feel it was appropriate, but I often wonder, what was going through his head at the time. Did he hope that would, that this was going to be over finally? Or was he just his usual stubborn self and just did not want to go to that hospital because he hated it?
And it's so unfortunate because I'm an trained end of life doula too. And people with terminal illness and terminal cancer, there is a way to have a death on your terms, how you want it to be. But people are so afraid to go into hospice. You can be on hospice for years. You have to be a candidate for it. But
Yep.
I mean, it's 6 months, and most people don't make it because they die in the hospital. But it is possible to, if the family is just open to, and that's hard for the family to get to that point, to be able to let go and to say, to accept that that's at the phase that person is at in their life. But it can be a very beautiful experience and a beautiful, and I'm sure people are rolling their eyes as I say that, but I've had people on this podcast who have shared with me. My own dad passed away in a nursing home.
Mine too.
It's like he was 44 years old.
Oh my goodness.
Like he could have died at home had there been and this was in late 80s, there's support, there's resources in most areas. I recognize that rural America is like thumbs down in that department because there's just a lack of resources and support when it comes to end of life. But it's so possible to have a death with dignity. And there's actually a nonprofit called Death with Dignity. They're trying to get legislation passed across America. And anyway, I'll link to that in the show notes. But thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah,
I'm curious.
I hope it wasn't too much. As I got talking, I realized, oh my goodness, boy.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, because you also have like your sons. Like I have so many thoughts. Like, how much of your son's anxiety was your husband's anxiety? Also too, like what I was going to say was I lost my train of thought. I had so many thoughts. I'll have to edit this out.
That's okay. I
I
get
think
it.
I'm kind of at a loss for words, actually. It's just a lot for one person to have on their shoulders. Did you have support during that time?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, not, I shouldn't say obviously. Luckily, I do have a very wonderful group of close friends that were there. But honestly, nobody could help me. I mean, they listened to me, and you know, it was that guilt between, I want him to stop suffering, right? But you hate to say I want him to die, because I don't. But to watch what happened to him, and again, there was a whole bunch of physical things. He was in a lot of pain. To watch that, I don't want that. Like, if he's never going to be the other person, then why? On the one hand, you know, and he was so stubborn that, you know, it was very hard, because I thought, I've got to bring someone in here to help me. You know, I was cleaning up all out. It was just a mess. And it was too much. And talking about my oldest son, I have two sons, my oldest son, and my husband, very similar. They were always talk about love, hate. So difficult. So I was always trying to play the referee between the two of them. And that's before he got diagnosed with the cancer. So for several years, when my son's mental illness really got pretty bad, and my son's mental illness came out in anger in a lot of ways. So it was not physically towards people, but it was a very volatile environment. My poor younger son, you know, that's another whole story. But so how could my friends, you know, I felt like I was really living in a nightmare, but I was just trying to make sure everybody was okay, keep them apart. When they were arguing, I would just try and, you know, figure out how to go to your corners and make everybody happy and do what I needed to do for everyone, you know. And here's the thing, is that I am so fortunate that I have a team at my insurance agency who is always there for me. And in those 6 months, I didn't have to worry about my business. Yes, I had to pay my bills and I had to pay them and I had to answer some emails and all of that. But I did not have to be in the office. I did not have to be online. You know, yes, again, there were things I had to take care of, but for the most part, that was removed from my life. And I could never have survived if that hadn't happened. Something would have had to give, because I was able to then take all of my energy and time and devote it to what was going on at home.
And imagine all the people that don't have that. And so thank you for acknowledging that it is up to us to create that for ourselves, to rally the people around you that fill the roles that are supportive.
Yeah, I am still to this day, because they're still doing it for me. I am just so incredibly grateful for these women. And I try and tell them as often as I can that it doesn't sound insincere.
And just in you sharing your story, I can just feel the heaviness of what the environment was probably like living in between your son and your husband, and how much of what your son was going through, how much of it do you think was grief of just witnessing what he was witnessing? I mean, did he look at his father like that was his hero as you did your father?
I think so. I think so, until they started having this kind of relationship. You know, my son has problems processing his emotions, or I should say, he processes them to the extreme. So every little thing that happened, you know, he took to the extreme. You know, my husband could have said or did something, and my son can't let anything roll off of his shoulders. You know, since my husband is gone and my younger son is away at college, there's a calmness, and I often think how different the feel in the house is. But my I think that on the one hand, but on the other hand, my son needs some help that I've kind of given this year to letting him grieve. Because look, as we know, grief is hard for everyone, and we all do it and process it, different timelines, different terms. It comes, it goes. You don't know when it's going to show up. Even when you think everything is fine, the next thing you know, you're crying. And for somebody like my son, it is even more difficult. But he's a work in progress, and he's still a concern for me.
But you know what? We all are.
Yes,
we all are a work in progress.
Yes, you're right.
Did they ever make a connection between the blood cancer and, because like with the blood brain barrier,
Nothing.
Really?
I kept saying, is this related to this? Is this what? Nope. No. And it could be, maybe it's just something. Why were they going to take the time to figure out, all the pieces of the puzzle? Because at that point, it was what it was with the blood cancer. There was nothing that could be done other than he was initially had started chemo that was only supposed to try and extend his life for a little bit. It was never going to be a cure.
You said something, I think it was on your website, that you had this belief that it is what it is. And yeah. In grief recovery, and what I've learned about grief is when people say that, it's generally a way to bypass our emotions. Do you still hold that belief?
No, I don't hold that belief. When I said that, it really wasn't about grief. It was about my life. It was, this is my life. It is what it is. Like,
well, when things happen
about it.
Yes. When things happen, like it is what it is. But
no control. But no, I 1,000% don't believe it. That's what I believed for too long. And it's only been since that belief changed that my life doesn't even resemble what it used to. And that's because I took control, and I continue to take control. And so it's an amazing feeling.
You mentioned the weight and shifting your focus and your mindset around that. In what other ways? What has opened up for you in the last 6 years?
Probably the next area that I focused on was money. It was money troubles were a dirty, deep, dark secret for me, especially because I am a CPA, no longer practicing, but I practiced for 10 years, run a business. And for years, for a variety of reasons, and there was a ton of excuses that I will tell you that I was telling myself, which were, when my son was first diagnosed, none of his therapy was covered. I would stop at nothing. I didn't care if I had to live in a shed. I was going to do whatever I could to help my son. And so that kind of started the downhill slide where, okay, I'll take a second mortgage. I'll do this, I'll do that. And then, it then morphed from there, already being in trouble, to, something that happened in the insurance industry in my state that caused me to lose 20% of my income or so right after we had bought our house. And it just kind of like continued. And what wound up happening was I knew that we needed to make a change. Anytime that I would just gently say to my husband, maybe you should pay attention to how much you're spending at the grocery store, he would get depressed and anxious and take it to the extreme. And I couldn't stand that. So I didn't say anything. So I would keep it inside, and then things would get worse and I would see what was happening. And then since I'm self-employed, I have to pay my own income taxes, and I couldn't make the payments. And then I'd say, okay, I'll catch up next time. And then next thing you know, it was a whole year. And it was a spiral, and I was too embarrassed to tell any person in my life, even my closest friends and family. I was mortified. And I realized, actually, I'll tell you what, this was another aha moment. In February of 2020, right before lockdown, my cousin and I went to see Oprah live in Brooklyn. She was, I don't remember what she called it. It was like a transformational tour. It was kind of in connection with Weight Watchers. And she went to like 10 cities. Each city, it was a whole day thing. And each city, she had a special guest star. And we went to this and it was wonderful. And at the end of the day, you know, I'm in a big arena, 16,000 people. At the end of the day, they turn down the lights. It's just Oprah and the microphone. And she tells some story from her childhood that was very vulnerable. And she said something like, "What secret are you hiding? What is it that you are not addressing, that you're trying to ignore? Because you know you have it. And I'm going to tell you, if you don't take control, it's going to erupt like a volcano and you will have no control over what happens. If you own up and take control now, you might not like what you need to do, but I can guarantee it's going to be better than that eruption." And I started crying because I knew exactly what it was. It was the money. And I went home and I thought, okay, if I'm, you know, then I really was I wanted to sell my house. But I kind of ran into the same thing, you know, my husband, my son, I even tried to like plant a seed, you know, give them a little time to, ooh, but that was, you know, tough. So I thought, okay, until I can get that across. I mean, I had realtor come. We have a lot of like things wrong with the house. Then it was, oh my goodness, this needs to be fit. Like we can't even put it on the market, you know, and I've got to spend $20,000. I don't have $20,000. So I said, okay, let me think, what else can I do? And I started by actually, this is when maybe it had been popular for a couple of years, selling things on Facebook. And I thought, well, what good is that going to do? But it's kind of the same thing with the Weight Watchers thing, right? Like, what good is just going to the meeting? Well, what good is it if I just, you know, sell this thing? How much am I going to get? But it turned into fun. And I was running around my house looking for things that I could sell. And even if I sold something for $2, it was like so exciting because it was like, you see, look, I found some things that were locked away in my basement. I didn't even know. I then actually started going on, and I can't remember what website I was on, Mercari maybe, selling and shipping. And I turned it into like this whole fun game. And that kind of made me think, well, I did this. Let me research, what do other people do? You know, what are other ways to make money? And that was kind of like my next aha moment. Also, then at the same time, addressing where I was with my tax situation, where I was with my debt. You know, I went to I explored my options, right? I went to a bankruptcy attorney. I went to a tax attorney. You know, and kind of came up with a plan. And I was taking control.
And was this at the same time as your husband's decline?
Yeah, pretty much, because my son was hospitalized in June of 2020. So that was February of 2020. So yes, it was all kind of happening simultaneously, which also really was a problem for me selling the house.
And energetically,
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
money is a currency, right? Money is energy. And I would argue it maybe wasn't necessarily even about the money, but it was what money meant, right? What
Yes,
money meant and where you were at in your life with money and that relationship with money. And so as you were making space energetically, did you start to see opportunities coming in?
I did, because I opened my eyes to things out there that I never would have thought of before, just like selling the stuff on Facebook or shipping the things, right? And then I started thinking, well, you know, it was such a journey. I started thinking to myself, well, I can go to my insurance agency, right, and try and figure out a way to sell more and make more money, which I did look at that, but it didn't light me up. I had been looking, what is it? I always it gnawed at me that I could never figure out what's my passion? What's my purpose? Did I really want to be an attorney? Did I want to be a CPA? Like, who knows? I'm watching my son now. He doesn't know what the heck he wants to be. He's going to be a second semester junior. He said the other day, oh, I'm panic stricken to graduate because he has no idea what he wants to do. So I've been searching. And at the time, I had just started using these supplements that a podcaster that I listened to, used and was selling. And I thought, because I think I have a very, I'm leery. I'm a New Yorker. I'm like, oh, yeah, this is just a ploy. And I listened to her talk about it for a year or so. And I said, oh, goodness, let me just try. And for me, it really made a difference, like in my mood, in my energy. I was like ready to go, but not in there was no caffeine. So it wasn't that kind of way. And so I thought to myself, well, I can only be passionate about what I feel passionate about. And I felt like this was really making a difference in my life. So I decided this must be where I need to go. Follow this feeling. And, I really started, I think at that time, paying attention to like the messages that were being sent to me, really trying to tune into my heart and my gut instead of my mind. Because earlier with that podcaster, actually, I signed up for a course of hers. It was more money than I could have ever imagined. Again, money was an issue. So my logical brain said, are you out of your mind? You're supposed to be figuring out how to get more money. And now you're spending money you don't have. But something kept bringing me back to signing up. What was the draw? And I listened to that instead of my logical brain. And it was all about mindset, and that was like start of my formal training on mindset. And so it was that same podcaster who then had talked about this mastermind group that she belonged to. I had no idea what a mastermind was. She brought on her coach, and she was in an elite mastermind, which were business people who, were making over a certain amount of money. But he had like a basic level mastermind for people making like 0 to 500,000. And I thought, well, I'm making 0. So that's perfect. I'm going to join this mastermind. They're going to show me how to sell this stuff. And here we go. And I walked into, I like to say, walked into the Wizard of Oz. Where is this online world? I had just been introduced to podcasts, for goodness sake. I had no idea this whole world existed. And then I saw people who were taking their experiences and sharing and helping other people, just like you're doing, right? Which, when I think to myself, I was so stuck on, well, don't they need some certification? Don't they, gosh, who do you want to learn from? I want to learn from someone who walked in my shoes, right? I mean, none of our experiences are exactly identical, but there's a lot of general stuff here that we can all relate to. And when I learned of that, I said, okay, I'm still taking my supplement. I like it and all, but that's not it. And it's another whole story, but I started something at that time called the Caregiver Support Squad, which was to help family caregivers learn to prioritize their own self-care.
Which by that point, you've become very much an expert, right? The hard knocks of caregiving, right?
Yes, for sure.
PhD in caregiving.
Yes, that's right. I didn't need to go and get that PhD from an accredited university. Life experience gives you all you need.
So when did the book come about?
So what I discovered after I started the Caregiver Support Squad is the people that I was working with, it was very hard for them, and understandably, as I just spilled my guts to you, to them, for them not to spend the time sharing the difficulties they were having with their loved one. And I didn't want to be about that. I wanted to be about what can we do for you? You know, what lights you up? Let's work together to figure out how we can work self-care into your life. And I just wasn't at a point where I could take on their difficulties, because it was difficult for me to sit there and listen to other people's difficulties, you know, while I was in the thick of it. And at that time, I realized, you know, I feel like what I've learned is broader message, self-care for caregivers, 1,000%. But I think what I've really learned is that a quote from The Wizard of Oz, which is my favorite now, got it right here. Someone gave it to me in a little makeup bag. It's from Glinda the Good Witch, and it says, "You've always had the power, my dear. You just had to learn it for yourself."
I just got full body chills.
And how many times did I hear that quote and didn't really get it? But when I heard it, I got it. And I want, from there, that's when I pivoted and said, if I was 50 plus and I didn't know it, I consider myself a fairly intelligent person. There must be other people out there who are just like me, who just don't think there's another way. You know, who can tell you why they're, you know, they can't, because that was me. So I get it. But yet I see what has happened since I shifted my mindset. And so I said, I need to reach all of those people and shake them and tell them, no, it doesn't have to be this way. But how do I reach them? It's like everything else, right? Podcasts, social media, like you just want to stand and scream. I want a megaphone that everybody should hear. Yep. And again, I never wanted to write a book. As I said, I'm a numbers person, never thought, ever dreamt of it. And I listened to the signs. And I, again, with a different podcast, a woman was on being interviewed, and she helped first-time authors get their story out there. And I thought, this is not even a regular podcast I listen to. This was meant for me to be heard. Like this, I was meant to listen to this, because other things were kept telling me about a book. And I was like, no, I can't do that. I can't. And I connected with her. And I guess that was it. I said, let me join the course. And then a couple of weeks later, my husband was diagnosed with the cancer. And I went to my therapist and I said, I'm embarrassed that I'm even bringing this up when this is going on in my life. I feel so selfish that I'm actually still considering taking this course. And she said, no, I disagree with you. She said, this is exactly what you need, because you need something right now, because you're going to be going through an intense period of time. We don't know what that's going to look like, but you need something completely separate from that, just for yourself. And, you know, being the A student that I am, I'm like, well, what if I can't show up every week? Or what if there's homework and I didn't do the homework? And what if I have to read out loud and I'm going to be embarrassed because I don't know how to write? I mean, I had every excuse in the book. And she said, who cares? Who cares? And I thought, well, I guess at least I have a good excuse, right? You know, I won't show up as a bad student. People will understand. And, you know, the minute that I was in, it was a very intimate group, all writing about different things, all first-time authors. And it was an amazing experience that I'm still on, that has started me on a trajectory that I could never, ever, I wouldn't have bet, you know, a bazillion dollars that I would ever be an author. And now writing my second book and already thinking about other books. It's like, who am I? And all because basically I followed the whispers and really tried to tune into my gut instead of the I can't that always comes into my head. And that's one of the reasons my book is named On Second Thought, Maybe I Can, because I spent my life saying I can't and telling myself and others all the reasons why I couldn't do something. And it could be a small thing or a big thing. And, you know, if we just take a pause and see what lives on the other side and say, well, wait a minute, maybe I can, that's where my life has changed.
So good. That was all so good.
Yeah, I never said it like that before. Boy, that did sound good. But it's
It did.
true.
It
It's
really did.
true. It's so true. I just hope I get that across. I really mean it. And this I hope this doesn't come across as bragging because it's not.
No, I'm going to say, I want you to brag.
Okay, well, I'm going to tell you because I'm preparing right now. It'll have been done by the time this airs for a master class tomorrow. And Lauren, that's my writing coach who I still work with, she said to me the other day, have you sat back and thought about all that has happened to you this year? It's like, what do you mean? She starts naming the things. I thought, you know, I'm not, it's like something happens, it's fun, it's exciting, on to the next thing, on to the next thing, on to the next thing. And I realized that that's something that I need to get better at is I do enjoy the moment when it happens, but then I'm very quick to say, okay, and what do I have to do next? What are we on to next? What are we on to next? And that's my personality. But looking back and celebrating the wins, the big wins and the small wins. So my husband passed away December 30th, and the Sprinkle of Hearts store opened January 14th. That was another whole thing that was in the works prior. And a week after my husband died, I had a TikTok video that went viral. I wasn't even on, like, I was on TikTok, but I don't go on TikTok. I had a virtual assistant who was posting on social media. And at the time, I was making videos every day with no makeup. I still do that a lot. Walking my dog in the morning. And I just would turn on my camera and say whatever was on my mind, like whatever, no preconceived, nothing. And most of the time, first take, that was that. And this particular day, it started with, it's been 8 days since my husband died. And I went on to say that everything in my life feels out of control. And I think I was talking about, you know, I'm eating cookies for breakfast, my exercise routine, you know, and then went on obviously to say how my whole life is turned upside down. And it wound up getting 3.7 million views. I got, oh my gosh, the most amazing outpouring of love through comments. I was blown away, blown away. I just, you just don't know. You just don't know. I gained like, I don't know, 59,000 followers. It was crazy. It was so crazy, but so crazy in such an amazing way, because it literally felt like the whole world was giving me a hug. And for whatever I said, I must have said something about walking, and it turned into this thing like, Debbie, I'm going to walk with you. Like, I'm going to walk this journey with you of like getting your life back together. It was, so that's how the year started. And then I was able, let me just say, like nobody, I have no connections. So I want to make that clear. It's not like, oh, she's got an in, and no. I'm an Oprah insider, $25, right? I don't know how many other people, millions, right? I get an email. Oprah's going to be taping one of her insider shows in New York. I live in New Jersey on this date. And it's about weight. And so they just asked, only respond if you 100% can make it because there's limited tickets. Anyway, it was a whole thing. I was visualizing. I had a whole thing going on. I wind up getting the tickets. It was an amazing experience. Less than 100 people in a little office, not a little, but in the Hearst office building. So not little. And at the end of it was 2 shows actually. And at the end of the taping of the second show, Oprah was like hanging out. And I had taken my book, and in my book, I have the story about February 2020. And so I wrote something in the front of the book. I put a bookmark, where that was. And she was wonderful. She was taking selfies with people. And I was right there. I don't even want to say stage. It was a little riser. And I'm waiting. I'm looking for something. I'm waiting. And she comes up to me. And I'm holding my book, and she looks like only talking to me. And I got to tell her, you changed my life by something you said. I saw you February 2020. And she said, what did I say? And I told her. And then I went on to tell her, and I wrote about it in this book. Because of that eventually led to this book. This is my like crappy printed picture, but it was incredible. I mean, we walked out of there, my cousin and I, and she said, what's wrong with you? And I said, what do you mean? And she said, you're so calm. And she started screaming, you just gave your book to Oprah. And I thought, oh my gosh, like, how did this even happen? So, and then a few weeks later, my book was published. That was actually before it was published. So I had this wonderful book launch. And then I represented all family caregivers on the Kelly Clarkson show. It actually comes out today as we're talking.
Oh my gosh. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yep. So she has a segment at the end of each of her show called What I'm Liking. And so it was a Skype interview in honor of National Family Caregiver Month.
December is National Family
No, November was.
Oh, November.
So we're taping in November. Yes. So it was November. So it comes out today, which is the 28th, November 28th. But you can always go to the Kelly's YouTube channel and find it.
I will. Please send me the link and I will put that in the show notes.
I will. He told
me. And I can't believe I completely missed National Caregiver Month. I completely missed that.
Well, that's okay. Now you won't next year.
Now I won't next year. Yeah. Those are huge wins. It sounds like a lot of full circle moments.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, it's not like I just explained my life to you. None of those things I could have ever imagined, predicted, nothing. And it never would have happened if I didn't just make that switch in my head and start viewing my life, my control of my life and my circumstances differently and following my heart.
All of that responsibility that you have felt and put on your shoulders and was on your shoulders in caregiving for others and everything that you had on your plate to do, turning that sense of responsibility on its head and putting it towards your life and taking responsibility then for your life, that's really the best use of the strength responsibility, because it is a strength. I'm a UMAP certified UMAP coach, which your son may be interested in that. I had my son take the UMAP assessment when he went to college. He's going into nursing. My daughters took it. I took it. It was life affirming for me. I'll put that in the show notes. But
okay, that would be great.
UMAP is an amazing tool to help you discern and determine what is the best fit for you. And it's about career and life satisfaction. But I think the message in this podcast is support, self-care, taking responsibility, and really what that message from the Wizard of Oz is recognizing the power that we all have within us.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's what changed my life, realizing no, it's not up to everybody else. It's not predetermined. It's up to how I respond to these things, how I choose to respond. And that's what's made the difference. And it can make the difference for anyone, regardless of what's going on in your life. There's always something you can do to take control.
How do you intend to spend December 30th this year?
Gosh, that's a great question. I don't know. Through the whole year, as we all know, those firsts, right? My first anniversary, Valentine's Day was just his birthday, the end of October. Thanksgiving was his favorite holiday. They're rough. My youngest son's birthday is December 31st. So it just makes it so hard, because I hate that he will think that they'll forever be tied together, and he'll be 21. So, my older son, I'm not really a cemetery person. I have not been back there. We wanted to go on his birthday, but for whatever, or my son wanted to go on his birthday, but it was closed or whatever when we wanted to go. If that's what my son wants, then that's what I'll do. I'm not sure. I think right now I'm not sure. Taking it kind of one day at a time. But I do find that, even now, thinking as I'm talking, last year at this time, I know what was happening. He was in the hospital, like reliving that hell that he and I went through differently. I want to get away from that feeling, because that was the toughest time for me. So I think I'm trying to take one day at a time. How's that? That's the answer. One day at a
That's all you
time. I don't
can,
have
really.
it. I don't know. And I find that I do this a lot. I have a lot of anticipation about these days, and I've spent so much time beforehand leading up to it that I don't want to say it's anticlimactic, but it's almost like I'm okay by that day. I've kind of like been so worried about it beforehand that I've worked through it by the time I get there. And in a way, I want that, because I want that for my son.
Well,
for my son who's turning 21.
right. And by sitting with it,
Mm-hmm.
and having that time to sit with it before, you can be you can help him sit in his grief maybe a little bit easier for
Yeah.
you, maybe. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to see your kids hurting
That's the
too. I
worst
mean,
part,
that's,
right?
yeah. Oh,
Yeah. That's the
my
hard
heart goes
part.
out to him.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. My little guy, the one who's going to be 21, he's a different person, obviously. And, he was more removed, because he wasn't, he was here. Obviously, he's not there in school all the time, but he was more removed from the day to day, especially between, when it really got intense from, whenever he leaves the end of August until he came home on December 16th, and only 2 weeks before. So it wasn't his reality. And then it's not his reality when he went back to school, right? Of course, it doesn't matter where you are, but when you're not living in that space and that place, and, he's got his separate life that he doesn't equate with the rest of us, I think that gave him separation. Who knows down the road when and how it'll come back, like I said earlier. And we all know people process at different times. He really has not had too much visible grieving.
There was something you said earlier about shaking the tree, and how just being kind of on the other side of this now, and still working through it, right? Because we all are always a work in progress. But there was so many parallels that I drew from what you were sharing into how I feel about grief, and how I just, the megaphone. And that's why my art my art for my podcast is me on an island with a megaphone, because you feel like you're alone. You feel like you don't have a choice. You want to scream from the rooftops. And for me, it's like it has two meanings, because I also want to scream the message that there is light at the end of the tunnel. Is there a tunnel? I mean, how long is it? I mean, that's up to you, really. I mean, you do have some power in that. There is no timeline. You're always going to have, I think with grief, it's like people just think like, I'm never going to be sad, or like that you have to get over it. And getting over it means that you're not going to be sad anymore. And the thing, even with grief and the work that I do with clients, I'm never promise you're never going to feel sad again. I tell you, you will feel sad, because those anniversaries come around, right? You're still going to feel something, and you will, because that relationship continues. The relationship with your husband is still going to continue, just in a different capacity, and how it lives within you. And that's the thing that we have a choice over is, do I want this thing to like pull me down, take me out of my life experience, have me checking out of my own existence? Or can I allow it to move through me and with me to help me expand and recognize my power and see my own potential?
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I do feel like, something happens, I'm looking up in the ceiling, or, talking to him all the time. I feel his presence. I feel comfort knowing that he's at peace, at least, out of his physical body, whatever you believe, but at least I know he's no longer suffering in that way. And, I can wish every day for the rest of my life that it didn't turn out this way, but that's not going to help me. Right. I mean, it doesn't work this way. Life takes twists and turns that none of us would choose, but it's how we respond to those twists and turns. And to sit here and feel sorry for myself and hope and wish and why and question, yeah, of course we all have those moments, but they should be far and few between, especially as we get a little further away from, the experience.
Is there anything else that you would like to share?
I think I said everything I have in my head. You got it all out of me and then some that I wasn't expecting. So, I really do feel like I hope that you and I both got our similar messages across, that if you're a person out there thinking, because I was thinking, oh, sure, they're saying that, but they don't know my circumstance, right? I could say, oh, but I'm dealing with this and this and this. I won't have it. And you shouldn't have it either. There are certainly times where life gets more intense, right? Those 6 months that my husband was dying, it was super intense for sure. But you know what? I wrote my book.
And the key thing here, and I want to just circle back to what you said about the caregiving groups and how it was too much for you to hear, their current struggles and things. And it really does parallel grief support groups too, because they can be the most supportive places, but they can also hinder your progress, because it really is a repetition of the story, right? It's this that's what happens at these. You can create great bonds and friendships, but at the same time, is it moving you forward? You're not taking action. It's the action that you take that makes the difference. And that's what I heard you say when you were speaking about that too. And same with grief. Same with grief.
Absolutely. I'm such a big fan of support groups because I do find them helpful when you are in a room with people who understand. I did not choose to do a grief support group because I felt like I didn't need it. Whereas I've been in many other types of support groups, and more recently with family members of those who suffer with mental illness.
Mm.
And, there's times when I need it and times when I don't, and times when I'm on there thinking, okay, this is not healthy for me. So it really just does depend upon where you are, the mix of people, the facilitator. But you just have to know what's good for you and pay attention to what's working and not working for you.
And listen
But
to the whispers.
action is, listen to the whispers. And the action is so the key. When other people were reflecting on my experience and they said to me, well, you took action. And I don't think I recognize that. So many of us think about all these things, right? And actually, I don't even remember what it was. It might have been about the book. And a woman I ran into, she said, gosh, you did it. She said, for 3 years, I had this idea, whatever it was. And she said, I just found, writings about it or whatever it was, 3 years later, collecting dust. And, 3 years is going to pass. A year is going to pass. 2 months is going to pass. Do you want to have that collecting dust? Whatever that is, whatever progress you're looking to make, time is going to move. Make the best use of it.
It waits for no one.
That's it.
Where can people find you if they would love to connect with you? Find
My
everything?
website
Yes.
is the best place. Thank you. It's Debbie R. The R is very important. Otherwise, you wind up in a realtor. DebbieRWeiss.com. And all my information is there. I am starting a group coaching program. Will launch soon after this podcast airs. So it's starting on January 9th. So if you're interested, go check it out. I've got some other offerings on there. And I also have a bunch of free different downloads, help you find your inner power, find time for self-care, and then some what I call morning sprinkles of goodness, which is some journal prompts and whatnot. So, and all my social media and all the things are all there.
Is the January 9th, is that group, is that for caregivers?
Nope. It's for any woman who is ready to make a change in their life and rewrite their story.
Yes. I'm all about that. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for everything that you've shared. Even if it was the first time you've shared it, it is my honor to have been a witness and to hear it. So thank you so much for sharing it with my listeners. My thoughts are with you and your family as you go through the holiday coming up, and your son and the anniversary. And that's where you have to rely on take your own advice, right? Self-care.
Yes.
Do what you need to do for you. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. This has been cathartic.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you so much. And remember, when you unleash your heart, you unleash your life. Much love.